This is iFanboy Pick of the Week 731, brought to you by iFanboy listeners just like you who are washing their hands and wearing their masks. Hello! Welcome to iFanboy Pick of the Week episode 731. I am Connor Kilpatrick, and this is Josh Flanagan.
I am Josh Flanagan.
And we're iFanboy. We read comics every week, and we pick out our books to talk about our favorite book. But as we've been doing for the last 6 weeks, we've been doing a weird hybrid show, a not normal show. The industry's not normal right now, and we're rolling with it. Although next week may be a return to normal. We'll find out. We'll see what actually happens.
Normal's a relative thing.
Yeah.
By the way, I'd like to take issue with the fact that when I answered that I am Josh Flanagan, you didn't follow up at all, and frankly, I sounded like a robot who had taken over me. And hi. Josh. That's exactly what a robot who was pretending to me would say, and you just let it breeze on by. And I don't feel safe. I don't feel appreciated. And I guess we're gonna have to do the show anyway with that sort of lingering in the background.
I think it was last time we talked about the fact that I've been going through the old shows and how bad they were originally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We were really bad at the intros. We didn't say we didn't say our names. We didn't say any it was because we didn't have a script. We didn't do a script at the beginning because we're idiots. We need a script. And
so, two things about this.
Yeah.
One is that I don't remember any of it. Like I don't like.
No, I don't
me,
either. Yeah.
If you ask me how we did the show, I'm like, well, we always did it just like we're doing it now. And I know that we changed the software at some point to do something, but because they stopped making it. I don't remember what that software was that we used to use. But
I knew it yesterday because we said it on the show. I'll tell you what we used to do, and we'll get going to the show because we have a lot to talk about. We used to not have a script until fairly later on. I remember we fought it too. We used to not have a rundown even. It was like a surprise what we would talk about.
Wow.
We each brought our own books to the table, and then we would surprise each other with it. Wasn't like.
So here's the other part of that. There was a part two. If not for mostly Connor, but probably somewhat Ron, I would still be doing the show that way. And when he said there was some fight about it, he probably meant me. I am, whenever it comes to planning versus improvising, I always let's just swing it, it'll be fine. The only reason I know to introduce myself at the beginning is because Connor spent years saying you have to do that. The only reason that you know what book we're talking about is because Connor makes sure that it's in the script, or that if I don't say it, he does. And I want to give you credit for that because it is important. It is the comic book characters, talking to the other characters, using their names so we know what is going on. And I don't do that without a lot of pushing. And
as someone who has been going through and recreating show notes for this old shows, we also did a really bad job of telling you what comic we were talking about and certainly the number of the comic we were talking about. Anyway, we are iFanboy. You'll be able to find all that stuff on our website if you want to see it. Here's your spoiler warning. It's a review show, especially for these old books. We're going to be talking about them. There'll be spoilers. If you haven't read the books we're talking about, either skip the part of the show, use the show notes, or just dive in head first, because who cares?
Well, you.
We're all going to die.
I mean, that was the point.
This week, Josh had to pick, even though it was preordained.
I did, yeah. It wasn't. I don't have a problem with the pick, but I wrote Josh as the pick, and I was like, well, I mean,
to be fair though, it's your fault because I wanted to do New Frontier in one block, and you said I can't read it all in 1 week, so we split it in 2 blocks.
So here's how I will own that. I think that was a very good decision.
Yeah, I think it was too. There's a lot to talk about.
If I had, one of the things is that when I started reading this week, I was like, I got to finish this book. It had none of the weight of a chore that a lot of the books do. And I know, you guys know, I'm not complaining about having to read comic books, but sometimes you're like, I got to make the donuts. Mm-hmm. And as I was reading this, there really was an intense sense of I can't wait to see what happens next. I was excited to be reading. There's excited to be reading and you having the time for it, and then there's enjoying the books, and those are actually two separate things. I've learned over the years. And as I got to the end, I instead of being like, I got to get on with other stuff, I was like, oh, that's it. Now, mind you, there was actually more in the edition that we're reading that I didn't really have time to read, but the main story, I was as it wound up, I was like, oh, that was faster than I remembered. I thought that was going to go on longer. I could take more of this. That would make me happy. Which I think is it's a testament to this book that. Did you guys enjoy us talking about it last week in the reverent tones that we did? Because buckle up, kids.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the second half of New Frontier. This is issues 4 through 6. As we talked about last week, 4 and I believe 6 were both pick of the week at the time, before the podcast when it was just written. So you have Darwin Cook on story and art, Dave Stewart on colors, Jared K. Fletcher on letters, and J Bone, who is Darwin Cook's friend and collaborator, did some inks on this volume. So we talked about it last time, but I hadn't sat down and read it for so long that the high points I definitely remember, and you definitely remember the stuff about the fight with the center and all that stuff. But there's a lot of the stuff around the edges that I totally forgotten about. So it was nice. It was a nice, fun revelation for a lot of it. There was a lot of scenes I had totally forgotten about, and a lot of it comes back to you when you're in the middle of reading it. But this, I forgot how late in the game Hal gets his ring. I thought it was much earlier. He gets it almost right before the end.
And it's funny is that he doesn't use it as Green Lantern for most of it.
Right.
Which I had kind of.
He didn't get the lessons. He didn't have the handbook.
One thing that I've tried to do, if I need an image, if I need a comic book image that makes me happy for some kind of desktop, or I have, like, when I turn my car on, it flashes an image up of my choice. So I was like, there's got to be something in New Frontier I can use there. I used to look for like a good Hal Jordan as Green Lantern from this, because he's my favorite Green Lantern. And there's not actually a lot of him. Like, all the big hero shots of him in this book are pretty much him as Hal Jordan. Yep. And there's even one, the very first moment when he turns on his ring, or he turns into the costume, like the bottom third of it is just his old, his pants. And so, like, then when he gets the ring, he flies up into space, screws up, falls down, and then he doesn't use it again. Like, he uses it to power his plane that crashes. Mm-hmm. But other than that, right up until there's literally no other thing he can do, which is totally the correct story, in the heroes.
He doesn't even wear a mask until after the fight. Yeah. Like, after the fight.
Yep.
At the end. It's he doesn't fully become Green Lantern until the day is saved. And
then he's the guy. Like, it's like he's the big hero of this.
Well,
sort of.
Well, so one of the, I think he is. I mean, there's a lot of this is an ensemble, but he's sort of the main character. You mentioned the extras, so I read I read this in the absolute format, and I hadn't in the past read the annotations. There was a time in our lives where we're all about annotations or extras or DVD extras or watching the documentaries, and at a certain point you just don't have time for that anymore. Yeah. And so I just hadn't read it for whatever reason, and so I was like, I had the same feeling you did. It was over. I was like, oh, well, there's more. I can keep reading about it. So I read the annotations, and we should mention completely coincidentally that doing this show is the week of the anniversary of Darwin's passing, which it wasn't a thing we planned on. It was just a coincidence.
But I did notice that, like, I think the last time I read this was right after that. So it was I read this 4 years ago.
So, but my point is that the annotations are written by him in the first person. And so it felt like getting to have a conversation, because you can totally hear his voice.
That was really my only note I was going to say. I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is him talking.
So you read the annotations?
I read most of them. I don't think I finished them, but I mean, that was the best thing about them. I was like, oh, this is, I don't know how, but like all of his voice came through in that stuff 1,000%.
But he talks about that Hal being his favorite childhood hero, and obviously the focus on the space race and
he's the main astronaut in the right stuff in this story.
But if you have that volume or any volumes that have the annotations, it really gives you a lot of insight into the creative process and how things changed and characters that changed throughout the. King Faraday was a smaller character who changed.
So is John Jones.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to see how the process goes. Also, we said something that was incorrect last week, which was that there were things about this volume that keep it from being in continuity with the regular, quote unquote, regular DC continuity. But actually, that's incorrect.
Yeah.
One of the things I totally forgot about was that Our Man wasn't actually dead. Like, that's a whole big plot point in the first volume, is that, Our Man's killed, and and that obviously would make a big departure from the DCU. But Our Man, it shows up at the end here in Suicide Squad prison along with other heroes, and so he says in the annotations that one of his tenets was nothing in here can contradict what was happening in the comics at the time. Mm-hmm. So this could slide in if DC was taking place in the Silver Age and never had that sliding scale of comics time. This could fit into there and not really contradict anything. It even ends, the last page of the story ends the first issue of Justice League of America. So it really is a really masterful. If you go through and see everything that he is referencing, all the characters, stories, Flash appears when Flash appeared in the real world. It's a really masterful work of even just planning and research and structure beyond the incredible art.
It's kind of interesting because if you think about the guy like that, he had kind of an encyclopedic knowledge of this real nerd shit, which is almost antithetical to the person. Like it doesn't, like it kind of, like he understands their characters, he understands their history, he knows sort of where it comes from. And from a planning standpoint, it's fantastic. And the ability to sort of change things around. It's interesting to me that he said, King Faraday and Martian Manhunter weren't terribly huge characters. King Faraday, he was the one the first time I read this, I was like, I don't know who this is. I can't figure out what the point is. And then it turns out that doesn't really matter because you get him as you're reading it. Martian Manhunter is a huge part in this. Yep. He becomes he's a symbol for, I don't know, like the uniting of all of these characters in a way. And then he's the one who talks to the center, and he's like a spiritual mascot for the whole thing, I think, in a certain way. But one of the best scenes in this chunk of it that we read, I really like the bit where Faraday's about to get roasted by the rocket, and Martian Manhunter this is his chance to escape, but he can't let the guy die, and he does the heroic thing, and he saves him even though he's after him. And then right after that, they have this conversation where, I love this thing about Martian Manhunter is that when he touches people, he gets sort of the feeling of who they are. So like when he touches Superman, he's just like, I just feel okay about everything now. Right. And when he sees into King Faraday's, self, he's like, you're a good man. You're trying to do the right thing. And that's, the ultimate. And then King Faraday's taken aback by this. This is another one of those one panel turns where the cartooning tells you exactly that the character visually has a revelation of a kind, has made sort of, they had their moment of clarity, and then they sort of develop a little relationship after that and trust. And I that kind of story makes me happy, that you can have the hard-edged government guy who doesn't give up his principles. He doesn't change what it is, but he sees truth. And then that makes him change his actions. Yeah, because
none of these people ultimately are bad guys. Like right. The villain here is the Center, which we'll get to in a second. And there's a couple of, here and there, Captain Cold or whatever, but like did you see in the annotations that Captain Cold is Grant Morrison?
I
saw that, yeah.
I went, oh, that makes sense.
But prior to that moment with Martian Manhunter, King Faraday's an asshole. He's rounding up superheroes, putting them in prisons. He tries to capture the Flash, and we all love the Flash, so we hate King Faraday. And later on, we see he's got a prison full of, the Atom and Our Man and Vandal Savage and everything else. He's and so you think, oh, he's clearly the bad guy, but he's not. And that's what John realizes, that he's doing what he thinks is right. He may not agree with it, but he's doing what he thinks is right for the right reasons. And so it's all about for the moment where they come together for a bit to fight a bigger threat. And it made me actually really sad to read in the annotations where he talks about that moment where, they come together to fight the Center. And he says, Darwin was Canadian who grew up with, America in his backyard and looked up to the ideals. And there's a moment in the annotations where he says, that's the thing about America, is it comes together to fight the fights. And it made me really sad to read that right now. And maybe kind of the only probably upside to his passing is that he doesn't have to watch what's happening, but and get his heart broken. Anyway, when I first read this, and I think even till fairly recently, I don't think I understood the Center, the villain, and I think it took really focusing on it now. I knew what it was. It's not that I didn't understand what I was reading, but I think it took reading this in one go, reading the annotations, sort of really absorbing it as a seasoned reviewer to really see all the little hints and little, revelations about what it actually is, and
What's
I
your
like it
take
much.
on it?
I like it much more now. I mean, when I first read it, I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know if I like this as a
I had the same.
climax. They're fighting an island.
Mm-hmm.
That's not exciting. Aren't they fighting Darkseid? That's the thing you think when you're 27 or whatever.
Sure.
And whenever I first read it, and then, but seeing how it's seated now, it's like the first thing you see in the story. It's Dinosaur Island, which turns out is a sentient being that flies up into the air. It feels much more Silver Agey and much more appropriate now as a seasoned person.
And it's like an unknowable thing.
Yeah.
I think at some point when they first come upon it, it's just like you can't even describe. There's no way to compensate for the size of the thing.
It's like Krakoa. It's a sentient
Yeah.
island,
With a rocket.
right? And dinosaurs that live on it.
And it's not even necessarily evil. It's not evil. It's not. It just doesn't regard the life on the planet as worthy. It's it's like bugs. I'm here for the resources. You think I'm going to go check out what else there is now? I gotta clean this thing off before I go. It's the immovable object in a way. And then I noticed very clearly, and some might have noticed before, but I noticed this time where, Superman gets knocked out of this pretty quick.
Yeah.
He has a great moment before that. He does that thing that John Jones says. He gives a great speech. He rallies everybody. He's like, all right, let's get this together now. But then he's out of it to make room for all of the other stuff that happened, because that's the problem with DC is that, well, why doesn't Superman just fix it?
Right. And it has to give everyone else the moment to shine. It takes everyone else's ingenuity, power, and courage to defeat the Center without Superman. So, we have Adam Strange, who'd been locked up in Arkham. And also, I totally forgotten a bunch of the stuff in the Absolute weren't in the issues. There's a bunch of scenes they had cut for page count or space that they put back in the Absolute. So there's a bunch of stuff that wasn't originally there, like Adam Strange being in Arkham Asylum and all that stuff. I think he just appears with Ray Palmer in the issues.
He's, what I did notice that he is hinted at like all the way through. Every time they show Adam Strange, he's reading the magazine that has Ray Palmer on the front. There's not a lot made of it, but it shows up several times before that happened. So, like he was planning, he knew what he was going to be doing all along.
So Adam Strange has to bring in Ray Palmer, who's not yet the Atom, but has the ingenuity and the technology. And then they have to utilize the Flash, and they have to utilize like the Blackhawks and the pilots for distraction, and they have to utilize Martian Manhunter's telepathic ability. Like everybody has to put a piece in for this giant plan to work to defeat the Center without Superman. And it's great. It's a great piece of storytelling because, it's about the entire DCU and all the little pieces that come together. It's it's terrific. It's really good.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Is there anything you don't like about it?
No. I mean, I think I enjoy the first half more.
It's funny. I kind of do. It's definitely two stories. If you buy the volume 1 and you buy the volume 2, like they're different. The one is the setup, and then this last 3 is sort of go. Mm-hmm. Sort of tonally. But I think one doesn't work without the other, obviously.
Oh no, and it's all one piece, but I really enjoy the building of the world aspect in the first half, where we're just sort of living in the DCU from moment to moment, as opposed to the second half, which is much more plot driven. Again, I really like it, and it's a ton of fun.
Okay, so here's a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
I like the John Henry story. I like how it's done. I like what it's supposed to mean. I like that he's trying to say this thing because there's a lot going on, because you can't talk about the beauty of the space race without also recognizing the fact that at the same time it was the worst, one of the worst times for African Americans and people of color and things like that. And I know, but from a storytelling standpoint, that doesn't feel like it quite fits.
It doesn't fit the plot, but it fits the tapestry.
Yes, I think that's it. It's not really a complaint, but it just is. It doesn't interact with the main story enough to. If just like on paper writing a novel, you'd be like, this doesn't fit in here. You're trying to wedge it in.
Well, I mean, it's the reason why John wants to leave when he finds out that John Henry was killed, mm-hmm. and then that sets him up to go to where King Faraday captured. I mean, all these. It's a catalyst moment, and in an epic like this, it's just sort of like it's world building.
And you have to spend more time on it. This isn't even really a complaint. It's a thing I noticed, and I was thinking about. I don't really have a fully formed sort of opinion on it. I wouldn't be like, you have to take this out. I don't think that's what I'm getting at. It's a little wonky in that. There's also a scene where we go and we hang out with it's about 4 pages where we're with the magic people on the moon, and it was fun, but there's pretty much no point in that.
Well, again, that's to show why didn't the Justice Society come out of retirement to save the day? Why did things change?
But that's a comic. But that's like a comic book thing. Like they're explaining something. I don't think they necessarily need to explain. If you took those 4 pages out, it would not make a difference.
Again, I think it's not a plot thing. It's the point of this is the transition to the Silver Age. So or the Silver Age itself. So why didn't Jay Garrick and Alan Scott and Dr. Fate and the Spectre, who are extremely powerful, come out and save everyone? So that's and Captain Marvel too. Why did even though he wasn't in this Justice Society, but you have to sort of he's doing the entire DCU here. So there's the magic element. Why didn't these guys help Phantom Stranger?
I get it. Other than that, there was one other thing that I don't really remember, so it couldn't have been so bad. The thing is, this half of the book is chock full of moments, visual moments, character moments. We had talked like earlier. You had said, King's a jerk. So there's this panel. It's literally one of my favorite comic book panels of all time for many reasons, where the Flash punches King Faraday. People talk about the Batman Guy Gardner punch. This is my favorite punch, for a lot of reasons. We'll post it somewhere. You'll see it. The sort of just the way that the lines of the whole thing work, the sort of left to right flow of it, where the lettering is, how the lines of even the whole drawing is fantastic. But even better than that is that the pages before is Flash and Green Arrow having like a little conversation at a table with donuts and coffee, and it's sort of, and you see King Faraday come in the background, and then it's almost like an offhanded comment. He's like, "Oh, hey, Flash, no hard feelings, eh?" And like in most comics, like that's the end of it. He just says that thing, and you go, "Oh, that was awkward." And on the page turn, it's just punch.
Crack.
Yep, crack. He's on the ground. Flash says, "None at all." Ollie is tickled by it. Ollie doesn't get along with any of the government men, so like that's a thing. It's beautiful. And then a couple pages later, there's a scene where they come up and they talk together, and this is, I was just thinking about this is a very Darwin Cook thing. It's squashed. Like, you got punched, we dealt with it. It's, this is how we handled it.
It's over.
And I loved it. I like, that is such a wonderful thing. There's another scene where Lois Lane is trying to do a report on what happened to Superman, and she basically breaks down, and it is the most un-Lois but yes Lois thing I've ever seen, where she just throws her mic down and says, "God damn it." And that is the thing where the thing that she is her job. That's always been the case with that character. The thing that's the thing that she does, and she can't do it because the other thing that she is that she loves Superman, but it's not even out as a thing here. Right. And Jimmy Olsen does this thing. He's like, "She loved him. Can't you see that, you idiot?" Because somebody says something awful. Like, well,
one of the guys is going to hit on her now because she's vulnerable.
Rocky, I think, which is funny because I was like, has that guy been an asshole before? I guess he's just the asshole now. But it was like another beautiful scene. There's a lot of that stuff.
I really like the arc of the Flash, who he's not again not the main character, but is in it a lot. Where he's integral to the win. Well, they can't do it without him. He's got to blast the center with Adam's shrinking ray. But he says that I'm meant for more than just chasing jewelry thieves around the block. Like I feel like I'm more than this, and that's sort of his arc with King Faraday too. Is the Flash becomes the hero of the day along with Hal Jordan and other people. Like his speech that he sort of like broke into the news and gave was really great too. Like I'm trying to help you. I love that he had the reference book to find out how many crimes there were. But he's one of the major figures in DC Comics. There's a reason why the Flash is always the main catalyst for all these adventures. And he was the first character in the Silver Age for DC. He's incredibly important.
I think visually, we always say like that's the best costume ever. But visually, whenever he's on a page, he's the focus of that page, and it's like the most superhero comic book thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's the most like that red on a page takes over everything, and that is as superhero comic as you can get, and that's why you can't beat that costume.
I love that he's skinny and smaller than other people. The sad thing about doing these 2 volumes is I think we've ended the show. I mean, there's no more reason to talk about anything else.
You're always looking for the poetic and symbolic moments. Like you're like, this will be the last graphic novel show we do. I'm like, who cares? Let's do fucking Yondu next week.
Why keep talking about comics after this?
That's true. And,
it's just going to be a disappointment.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Well, how did you feel about the ending in which Aquaman shows up with Superman?
I don't. It's not my favorite. There's not like it's funny because we were just talking about all this other stuff that you're saying. Well, these are sort of explanations for why this is going on, and there's the Aquaman stuff is very subtle. Like hey, there's a bunch of fish swimming around this island. It's almost like an afterthought.
And he makes one appearance earlier in one page.
Yeah,
2 pages maybe.
I mean, I don't know. Was Superman knocked out the whole time? Was he taking care of him? What was the deal? Then the alternate ending was that
very
Superman,
homoerotic ending.
Yeah, it was. He's like, I had to leave this out because it didn't really work, and also, it was kind of gay. And then the obligatory. Not that there's anything wrong with that, just not the tone that I was going for. And I was looking at the pictures, like, yeah, it did. I think that there had to be a device to show Aquaman because he's got to be part of the Justice League, which is the end of this, and B. You have to get rid of Superman, and then you have to show him coming back.
Yeah, and also, again, I think it also opens up that there's this larger world that is now unfolding to the DC universe, which includes Atlantis, and you don't need him for the story or the fight, but it's sort of a nice way to. It's a nice button at the end to be like, oh, Superman's back, and there's a guy living under the sea, and now he's part of the team. I love the epilogue that uses Kennedy's New Frontier speech, and shows the DCU unfolding from this point.
I'm also going to tell you, I would not have known that was the New Frontier speech the first time I read this.
Yeah.
And that whole thing is really interesting because I think it's really hard to do that balance and not seem hokey. Mm-hmm. Like the fact that works is insane because it shouldn't. It should be like, all right, I think that. Not a lot of people can get away with that. And I don't know that we're saying he can get away with it because we just really liked it.
It's a good speech, though.
It is really well written. The speech is really good, but because of that, all his speeches are good. His speeches are amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to the Kennedy Museum and they're just kind of playing in the background all the time. And it's just one thing after another that if you can actually understand what he's saying, it's beautiful language. And nobody talks like that anymore, but it worked. Yeah.
Presidents certainly don't talk like that anymore. It's just terrific. It really is. It's a feat. It's quite a feat. It took him, I think, actively. I think it's 18 months or 14 months actively working on the book.
I thought you were going to say 4 years.
Oh, I'm sure the research and planning took much longer, but the actual drawing and writing and editing and changing and revising, he said it was 18 straight months or 14 straight months or something, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. But he created one of the seminal comic book works of the modern age with it. So,
yeah, and in a way, the last word on.
It's kind of amazing that this happened at all because if you think about it, at the time he wasn't anybody in comics. He'd come from animation. I mean, he had tried to get into comics as a younger man. He made this when he was 41. Mm-hmm. And then left for animation when he couldn't get into comics, and he came back and. He liked to tell the story that when DC did a panel for the first issue at Comic-Con at San Diego, and literally one person showed up to it because he was no one. Who was this guy, Darwin Cook, and what is New Frontier? No, there's a lot of other panels.
I'm guilty of that too. Like I didn't. I wasn't ready for it. They weren't ready for it. People, that happens. There's a lot of
I'm just saying the point is it's kind of amazing that this existed at all.
Yeah, I mean.
Mark Chiarello was the editor on it. Yeah, the legendary editor and production guy, and he, I don't know if they had a relationship prior because they all knew each other. It's not a small community, but it's kind of amazing that DC published this
in the format they
prestige,
did too.
48-page issues, 6 issues, prestige treatise on the DC unit in the Silver Age at all from this basically unknown guy, and put a lot of resources behind it.
I like that though. It tells us that somebody there, regardless of whether the market knew or was ready for it or not, was like, no, this is a thing. This is a special thing, and we're gonna invest in it. Somebody must have fought for it. Somebody must have agreed. Whatever compromises or things were taken to get there. Thank goodness they did. And it's so many of the things that like I really like, maybe weren't understood at their time. Mm-hmm. And for the first thing that comes to my mind, unfortunately, is like Office Space. But we just talked about like Almost Famous. Like at the time, it failed at the box office. And the stuff didn't really kick in until later when there was that aftermarket, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's kind of okay. It's hard to get that stuff through. Seinfeld didn't, like it
it's
almost
a failure
didn't
the first
make it.
season. Did you read the reread the special issue?
I didn't yet. No, I will.
So he talked about in either the afterword or whatever. I read everything, so it's hard to remember what was said where. But he had tried to launch a couple of spin-off series originally. There was going to be like a King Faraday series, and then there was going to be a Black Canary Catwoman team-up miniseries. But neither one went anywhere. So he emotionally closed the book on New Frontier. Then when they did the animated movie, they asked him to do the special issue as a sort of tie-in, not to the movie, but sort of promote all of it. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, I sort of emotionally closed the book on it. I didn't really do any more, but then he figured out a story and told the Batman Superman story. But it was interesting to see. For a while he was ready to keep doing more of it, and then when DC didn't, or for whatever reason didn't happen, he decided.
How do you feel about that? Do you think? I mean, like I'm reading this now, I'm like, I'm kind of glad that wasn't a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost always better to not do more.
I mean, he ended this like that was a button.
As much as I would have been like, Darwin, do 3 more of these. And
sure.
But it's, he did The Spirit. He did other things. They were all great.
I'll tell you why I didn't read the ones after this, because when I finished it, I was like, that was perfect.
I'll tell you what bums me out. And they have the artwork for the toys that I own. I have all the toys, all the New Frontier toys. There was supposed to be a John Henry and a Robin. Also, in addition to, I don't know why they made a Dr. Fate, other than it looks fucking awesome and it's one of the best looking ones. But he's
in there like 4 pages.
Right, he's in like 4 pages of the story.
I didn't understand why they made a Blackhawk, other than just like
he loves the Blackhawks. That's why.
I know, that's what I mean. Like that's why when you're like, yeah, he was going to do a King Faraday story, I was like, that would have been a mistake. I mean, it would have been great, but like it's just like it's like saying I don't even want sales.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about it a lot last week. This is one of the seminal works of the modern age. This is one of our favorite graphic novels, superhero stories. It changed. I think it changed the way I look at a lot of things in terms of comics and reading comics and what comics.
Every time I read it, it changes the way that I look at things. And
it defined his view of comics, even up until the point where we had that panel discussion, which you can find on our YouTube page with him, a year before he died or so, about this. This is the way he saw the DC universe, and he wanted it to be more like this. He thought.
I mean, that I think for you and I certainly is the effect. I mean, I think that every time we go back to like, why can't these characters be like that, or at least in the spirit of that? It's like, how many of these characters is the best version of them?
Almost all of them. Well, one thing we've never mentioned, and haven't mentioned yet, is it's the Darwin Cook cliche, but most of the time, except for in dire circumstances, these characters are smiling.
Mm-hmm.
It's the antithesis of the modern age in which everyone is Batman. We talked about it on the show a couple weeks ago. Everyone has the tragic, angry backstory and is always gnashing their teeth. In this one, almost every time you see the characters, they're smiling, which is just it tells you everything you want to know about how you see superheroes.
Yeah, and I mean, the Flash is, I think, the best example of that in this. Like, has to find out why his mom died. There was a time, like, he got these cool powers. but he loves this girl, and he's trying to do the right thing, but he's trying to understand what that is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why you need more than that. And like Jeff Johns is not stupid.
No, and he's a great writer.
Yes.
I'm always saying it on the show. We talk about the books regularly. I don't know why you need to overly complicate these characters or make them overly backstory, or give them all tragic backstories or make them totem characters or whatever. Just to me, it takes away when they're all characters of destiny. It takes away the choice, the heroic choice to be a good guy. When I'm destined to be Green Arrow, as they did for a while, like then you're taking away Oliver Queen's choice to do what he did, and that makes him a less interesting character. He could very easily just laid back on his money, but he chose to do good, and that makes him more heroic than, well, my father was a Green Arrow and his father was a Green Arrow. It's just like, well,
yeah, and also like that choice that they're doing is more, it's more heroic, especially if you don't really have like it's a calling, it's a thing I have to do, it's something in internal, it's part of me. I mean, honestly, like I was gonna say that's kind of Superman's deal in a way. He's abandoned, but he has to do the right thing. But he's got omnipotent powers,
and he gets that from Mom and Pa. Like he wouldn't necessarily be that way. Before we wrap up, I do want to mention that at the time, one of the most striking images, and it remained so upon the reread, was the bloody Wonder Woman invisible plane scene, where she shows up to warn them about the center, and she's flying her invisible jet, and you just see the blood on the walls and the floor, which establishes the space she's in by the negatively. And it was just, I remember reading the first time going, oh shit, and I had the same reaction again, even though I knew it was coming. It's just such a striking image to see the blood spattered cockpit of this invisible plane from the outside. It's a great image, and also Superman picks her up and says medic, harkens back to them being soldiers. And when she comes back, it actually has some oomph to it. Yeah,
for sure.
It's terrific. It's really terrific. I'm hoping. I hope this led to more people reading it or rereading it.
I mean, we know it did that. We can at least say that was accomplished.
Yeah.
So get ready for a lot more reviews on a curve. Get ready for a lot more like.
Yeah.
This was fine. It was okay. That was a cool drawing.
So this week we had a more digital first comics from DC and a couple of issues of other regular books that came out digitally. Josh, late last night before I was going to bed, texted me and said, hey, Batman Gotham Knights #4 was written by Mark Russell. I was like, okay. And so I'm going to start by saying I don't want to read these books anymore. I don't want to read these digital first books anymore.
I think it's really interesting that you have just like I didn't mind them as much as you did, but like you've eschewed them. You said
they're just middle of the road. I mean this issue was good, but it was like I said, Mark Russell having turned down from 11 to 6 or 5. I thought the first half was really good. And funny and weird, and then it got more conventional once the Joker showed up. But like, it starts off with Bruce Wayne. He's at the club with a bunch of assholes, and you're wondering why he's even at the club with these assholes. But they're casually talking about all the horrible crimes they commit as super rich businessmen, human trafficking and pollution and all this stuff. And Bruce goes into the bathroom of the club and comes out as Batman, just beats the crap out of him. And I laughed really hard because that's just such a bizarre image of like Batman just shows up at the country club to beat up these assholes. And that was funny. That was really funny. Yes. And then the guy calls Bruce. So the Batman gets them all arrested. They're all in jail, which was at a very low bail rate. So they would all be out immediately, but they're not. Bruce comes to visit one of the guys in jail. He confesses to more crimes through the prison phone. Cut to Batman in his jet going out to, and just the hard cuts to Batman beating up these guys was funny.
Yes.
And then they stopped doing that, and then they brought the Joker in, and I got less interested in it.
I mean, the thing that I've taken away from this is that I'll put it. There's a couple. Mark Russell, he's one of the greatest. I can still say new talents. I think in comics.
Relatively, yeah.
there's a lot of people who've been around for 10 years. Even if he's been around for 5 years, that feels new in the terms of comics. These kind of stories rarely serve him very well. He's at his best, and we've seen it when he's sort of much more free to run than he is with these, classic superhero tales. And I understand very much that if you want to make a career writing comics, this is the work you do. But I tend to think that it dilutes what is great about him. And it almost makes me not want to read a Batman that has his name on it. Now I will, because I love his work and I sort of want to give it a chance, but it's almost always, it's not bad, but it's kind of a little disappointing.
Yeah.
It's like when your favorite musician joins another band on stage and you're like, I mean, it's great that he's there and he's having fun, but this isn't really why I signed up.
I just don't know if it's that or if it's whatever the direction was for these particular books in these 80-page giants or whatever they were first appeared in. Because they were all we read them all that first week and they were all the same sort of milquetoasty, inoffensive and uninteresting tone.
It's interesting that that's what people think will bring people. That's like what somebody thinks that will bring new people in is like, let's give them something really bland, as opposed to something amazing. Why wouldn't you give somebody your best food? Why would you give them chicken fingers?
Yeah. Well, chicken fingers are delicious, but
they are, but they can also not be good. And you gotta set your level for that. And then I think one other, do you have a related
the idea that he has here, which is that, there's crime behind all corporate success is not uninteresting, and it's not a new idea. So the idea that maybe there's dark things afoot at Wayne Enterprises, which is not a new idea, but it fits in with Mark Russell's worldview and his work. Mm-hmm. It just felt to me like they shaved all the edges off of him. Like I said last time with Swamp Thing, like they just said like it was Mark Russell basic cable version. You know what I mean?
And yes, I do, and it's just not quite as much fun that way. I think what I was gonna get at is that, how some people will be like, I don't know why they're cramming politics into this. Mm-hmm. I think Mark Russell crams politics into stuff, and I don't think he does it on purpose. Like, I don't think that he has an agenda. I think that's who he is, and when he writes something, he puts himself into it. And I think that there are places that it works really well, and there's places where it feels like a weird fit. And
yeah, I mean that's what he does. When you're hiring Mark Russell, know what you're going to get. It's not like he's not. But
But because of the fact that is sometimes an incongruous fit with a superhero story, I always notice it. You know what I mean? Like when you're doing it with Snagglepuss, or you were doing it with Christ, the way that he did Red Sonja wasn't even political. It was like, because there was no politics that he could do. There was stuff on leadership and Machiavellian kind of stuff, and that worked really well. But everything he does in a superhero comics tends to be with this class struggle, because I think that he can't not think about it that way.
Well, it worked really well with Wonder Twins.
Yeah, but again, that was also a book where he had freedom to make it funny or silly or whatever the tone that is he wanted to do, and he can't do that in Batman. He can't do that with Lex Luthor or whatever it was.
I think he could. I mean, I think
yes.
I think there's a fear to let him, but I think there's no reason why his storytelling couldn't work with any of these characters.
Okay,
They have to let him do it.
This isn't about his ability.
Yeah,
it's about sort of what his marching orders are. The product that he's being asked to create.
Apparently,
he's being asked.
Apparently, Los Angeles is burning down. Just in case anyone's wondering, I don't know what's happening, but you can keep going. So,
Jesus, get out of the building.
I don't know. I mean, there is a lot of smoke. Is that a sign?
I like that you're like on the deck of the Titanic podcasting. Like you're like, we're gonna play this song all the way through as the ship goes down. This is how you should go down, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or reporting from the Hindenburg. Anyway, no, I don't think you're wrong. I think he can tell interesting stories with anybody. It's just a matter of will they let him? And this just feels very much like, hey, Mark, tell a Batman story. Do it with your funny jokes, but don't do it too funny and don't do it too pointed. And it's just kind of like at that point, it's like, well, why am I even reading this?
Right. Let Mark be Mark.
Exactly.
I mean, like if you were saying he was going to do 6-10 issues on Batman and you were going to let Mark be Mark,
It'd probably be really interesting.
Yes.
It wouldn't be this, I don't think.
No.
So I'm done with these books. I'm done.
I keep saying it, but I keep reading them.
You can't make me read them anymore.
I don't want to. It's fine. Hey, we have a lot of people to thank for this, and we're going to get to some of that later, but I wanted to mention patreon.com/iFanboy. You've heard by now that we hit our next stretch goal. The old video shows are being uploaded regularly as we speak. Connor is analyzing everything we did wrong in the past.
Our first con video was just put up on YouTube, our 2007's New York Comic Con.
Oh, yeah?
The first time we ever did a con, and we did like 3-minute interviews with people.
Yes.
We were learning as we went. I mean, there's a lot of people in that first. We just did one episode. There's a lot of people we talked to, but they're each like 3 minutes.
And they're not good.
No.
Like there's bits in it that are funny or whatever, but there's nothing.
Although like, it is the again. Oh, the building's on fire. It's the origin of vaudeville. It's when we were interviewing Keith Giffen talking about Justice League, and we were just doing vaudeville.
We must have done something right.
That's the origin of that joke, in case someone's wondering.
It's a good joke. Anyway, so we thank everybody for that. We've got another Media Explode that was unlocked for that. Well, that'll be coming up at some point. I don't know what day
April, right? No, June. We did a May one already.
Thank God.
Yeah.
The next stretch goal is the quarterly barbecue, an email video show. If we hit 5,000, I'm not rooting for it.
Did you notice how I didn't even know what month it was?
Yeah.
I don't know. I had no idea.
Did you notice that I entirely accepted that?
It's just like, July?
Who knows? So get over to patreon.com/iFanboy. That is, it's been wonderful. It's been really heartening to see people come out and support the show, and you know, it's a way of sort of knowing, not just for us, but for, you know, like the things that are valuable to people, and like a lot of the sort of smaller content creators, they're becoming very, very valuable to us right now. Certainly as much as the bigger, you know, like there are podcasts that I look forward to way more than there are TV shows that I look forward to, for sure. And I think I get more out of it. And you know, Patreon for us and for other things is a way of supporting that. And right now it's nice. You know, there's not a lot that's nice, but I the sort of goodwill that comes from the whole thing that, you know, we're seeing through Patreon, but also just seeing through how people talk about the show and the things that we're doing. It's great. And so we want to thank people for that. If you'd like to be part of it, go over to patreon.com/iFanboy, or you can get over to the t-shirt store, which is at ifanboy.threadless.com. Not just t-shirts, but all sorts of products and sweatshirts and different kinds of t-shirts and tank tops. And I don't know if do we have leggings? I don't even know. Probably not.
We don't have masks. People have asked. We didn't update that. Threadless is offering masks in certain designs, but we inquired about it. It wasn't a product line that we could just enable, which is normally how it works. We had to ask, and they said only certain people are getting to use the mask design, or getting to utilize the mask design. So we're not one of them for whatever reason. We didn't really ask because there's a lot more things going on. So
that's interesting because certain people are only allowed to use the mask device.
Right.
Which is that's interesting.
So there are no masks in our designs. We apologize.
So there are 8 designs now. Let's not forget mostly about the original Stay Home and Read Comics t-shirt. A portion of all those sales will be going to the Comic Book United Fund when those payouts start. So then that's a promise on our part. That's going to be there, and I'm glad that there's a place to send that now. You know, we'll get new designs when we are able, but for right now, there's plenty of stuff up there for you. Nothing Makes Sense, Nothing Matters has never, ever been more appropriate. Although Nothing Matters feels a little rough now that I'm saying it out loud. But in comics, anyway, it remains true. There's no consequences.
Yep.
I could go on this. I'm gonna half my Mark Russell right now. You can go to ifanboy.com/support if you don't want to deal with any of that rigmarole, and there's a PayPal link there if you want to make a one-time donation in the tip jar or something like that. There's plenty of ways to do that, and we thank the people who do that. And then finally, if you need some stuff delivered to your house because you don't want to go anywhere, and you can go to ifanboy.com/Amazon. You can find links to buy the books on Booksfloat. You can find every pick of the week. You'll see the pick linked in the book we're talking about, so you'll be able to find it there if you're having some sort of trouble with that. Or there's just a general link to Amazon to get the things that you want and need in your home while you are staying there. Let's talk about the Patron Pick.
Yes, patreon.com/ifanboy is where you go. You're a patron, and anyone who's a patron can vote to add a patron pick when we have them. Now they've been back since there's been some new comics. We've been doing it as a poll on Patreon, which is not the normal way to do it, but when there's only a couple of books, it's easier that way. So I think the normal patron pick voting mechanism will return next week. Anyway, the patron pick this week was Lois Lane, number 10 of the 12-issue maxi series by Greg Rucka, Mike Perkins, Andy Troy, and Simon Boland. This issue won by 2% over Avengers of the Wasteland number 4, which is a book I don't even know what it is. So, this book's weird, Josh. I was really enjoying it and would look forward to it. I was happy when it came out, and now I don't know what's going on, and I don't feel very connected to it anymore. Partially it's because it's been so long. I feel like they could have used a recap page. I know DC doesn't like recap pages, but comics haven't come out for about a month, so maybe, or 2, and when books are not coming out, especially when they're coming out so often, maybe throw us a bone with a recap page. But also DiDio's not there anymore, and he was the one that didn't like recap pages, so maybe do that. But anyway, I don't even know what's really going on in this book anymore.
The thing I liked about it originally, and there's still some of that, I really like Lois in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I like her relationship with Superman, but it's now a half Renee Montoya book, and it's Greg Rucka clinging tenaciously to a character that he pretty much conceptualized and fleshed out, and then they did a bunch of shit to her that I wish they hadn't. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming he wishes they hadn't, where they took her and made she was a Gotham police officer, and then became the Question, which has always been sort of tenuous, but it's a way for her to stick around, and he gets to write her every once in a while and spend time with her, and it's fine. But as we get into these other characters and this weird multiverse thing going on, it's again, I mean, we've talked about this many times. It is an explanation for something I don't think that we need explained.
I just literally have no idea. Like in the beginning, when it was Lois and Superman occasionally, and Mike Perkins' weird but interesting art, and then even when Renee showed up at first, it was fun. But then they got into whatever this mystery was that Lois has been investigating, and I just don't have the plot thread of that anymore. I don't know what's going on. I literally don't know what's going on.
Okay, well, from what I can tell, like there was a strange lady. There's many brunette,
right,
white, or slightly darker than white skinned women who were in this. And then there's a lady who's a skull, and they all look basically the same. And I think weird but interesting is a great explanation for Mike Perkins' art on this. And they all feel weird, and they're trying to figure out why. And basically the thing is, like, the one lady is a witch, and they need to fix something, but they're all out of place multiverse people. Mm-hmm. So sort of like Miles Morales or Spider-Gwen in a place they're not supposed to be. I think that Into the Spider-Verse did this better than this book is doing it right now.
Right.
However, and I am unaware if Ryan Haupt listens all the time, but I'm guessing a physicist does listen, and there's a problem here.
Okay.
And I might get this wrong. And I wasn't going to do this, but they called it upon themselves, and then we're going to give ratings and move along, because I think we're in the same place with this book. I want to like it a lot. There's a lot of things that I like about it. It's getting off from what I liked. So they talk about the multiverse in the way that there are these other planes of reality that is fairly easy to understand. That there's different universes and dimensions and things that we're not able to get into. There's a theory that every decision that you make splinters off a different timeline and therefore a different universe. So there's another universe where the decision that you made, it goes in a different way, and everybody's doing that all the time.
This is heavy.
Is there something about gravitational pull in the future I don't know about? That theory tends to not be in vogue anymore because of the idea of the conservation of mass. Mm-hmm. You take too much energy to do that. You can't create mass and energy out of nothing. And I wasn't, and so I thought, well, it's weird that they're going with this, because this is not the thing anymore.
And it's also not really the multiverse. The multiverse doesn't exist because people make different choices.
It's true. So I wasn't going to bring it up
in DC.
But then later, they're about to do this spell, and basically it turns out that what the spell is that when the Skull Lady shows up, they're going to switch places with the Skull Lady and another person, and that's going to be their magic solution. Which it's a lot of effort to do that. I feel like there's other ways to do that more appropriately in the DC universe. Anyway, at the last second, the magician lady goes, "I forgot about the conservation of mass." And I thought, well, if you're gonna mention it, I have to point that out. But B, and I don't know if they use it correctly here, but in the latter part, I don't think they ignored it in the earlier part. The idea was that she hadn't considered how much the Skull Lady weighs, and they have to if they're going to transfer them back and forth, it has to be the exact same mass. But I thought, but the conservation of mass is why the whole thing you were just talking about doesn't work. Anyway, sorry, that was I listened to like one thing on physics, and now I think I'm an expert. That's what that is. But it got me. Like, I noticed it. I was like, oh no, you're going to something that I've been learning about, and now it bothers me. And that's why you should never learn new things.
It was very convoluted, and it's a bummer because again, I was very, like the first half of this, first 5 or 6 issues, I was really into this book a lot. I liked it a lot, but ever since they've gotten into this wonkiness with the nun and the Skull Lady and Renee, and it's just. I'm
just saying, like, I assume that when Greg Rucka does a novel, he doesn't put this kind of shit in.
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like, this isn't what's in. Like, we're not going to find out that over in Lazarus there's a multiverse problem, and I know that he's in DC now, but I don't think it's working for you. Ratings.
I didn't enjoy it. Out of 5, 2.5.
3.25 stars.
Sticking with it, yes. There's only 2 more issues.
Yeah, I've been overall. I've enjoyed it. I'm not gonna get rid of it.
Like, yeah, overall, first half, this is one of my favorite things happening along with Jimmy Olsen. That whole weird new Superman corner, but it's veered off into a direction I've not been excited about. All right, so let's talk about patron powers. So if you're at patreon.com/iFanboy, any patron can vote for the patron pick, and thanks to everyone who did. But if you give the $5 or higher level, you get your own superpower live on the show. And as we mentioned a couple episodes ago, we got a lot of new patrons, so the list has now grown quite a bit. So stay patient and stay tuned if you're one of those people. Let's thank Stewart Bryson. Stewart Bryson can change any glass he has, like a drinking glass, into any kind of drinking glass. So if he has like a...
Did you just take a drink while you were explaining?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
If he has like a pint glass, but he needs like a martini glass, he just changes.
What you've just learned is that Connor... is Tippler the right word? Would you say,
if he needs a double bourbon glass, or he needs Tom Collins highball glass, he's got it. Nick and Nora, he's whatever he needs.
I don't even know what you're talking about anymore. Like, it's just it's a whole different world, and that's fine. You cope what you can, but Are you done?
I'm just saying whatever glass he needs, he can have it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Daniel Spigarolo. Spigarolo. Spiggy down the block, Mm-hmm. His power is that he can always tell when somebody doesn't know what they're talking about. He knows that they don't. Now, he doesn't necessarily know the answers. So, for example, if he was listening to the last segment, he goes, "This guy doesn't know anything about astrophysics."
Right.
Or physics and multiversal things. He would know that.
Right.
He'd be able to call it out with absolute sureness. Now he couldn't tell you what the actual thing is, but like, that's wrong.
Right.
That's just what you're saying is wrong, or that's not.
He just knows people are bullshitting.
Yeah. But here's the key, though. A lot of people say things where they don't think that they're bullshitting, but they still don't know.
Sure. He just knows people are talking like they know what they're talking about, but they don't actually know what they're talking about.
Right. Yep, that's his thing.
Patreon.com/iFanboy. That's where you can go and get your superpower. And thanks to everyone who does. And now it's G.I. Joe Corner. We are returning, and we're adding Ron Richards to the show.
Hello, gentlemen. How you doing?
We didn't mention this last week, but after the first volume of the first 5 episodes, we asked, "Hey, are you enjoying this? Do you like this? Give us some feedback." And we had some negative feedback, but
did we?
Overwhelmingly positive.
What was the negative feedback?
I don't care about G.I. Joe, so I don't like that segment, which is fine. We don't expect everyone to care about every segment.
So everyone knows you can go to ifanboy.com and you can see the time codes of when things are talked about. Just skip ahead. It's included in the description, too, in the feed, too. So
And we don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Not everything's for everybody. So if you don't like this segment, that's fine. But overwhelmingly, it was a very positive response. But occasionally, I just wanted to mention that if you don't like the segment, that's fine. That's just...
So as we move into this, I want to preface with, and I think you're all going to agree with me. The very beginning of this episode, I thought maybe we have run this thing out.
Yeah, I was right there with you.
I had a little bit of a moment because there are themes that repeat.
Yeah.
But as we got moving, I realized that no, there are universes in front of us.
So this is G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, The Vines of Evil, The Revenge of Cobra Part 2, which aired September 10th, 1984. Dan Thompson, Ron Friedman, as always. So
I didn't go back and check. Did the opening sequence of the first episode also be very Zartan Dreadnought heavy? I don't think it was.
Interesting. Maybe they. Interesting.
The credits was an entirely Joe versus Dreadnought Zartan sequence.
It wasn't the first time, or was it?
Yeah, it wasn't.
Oh, maybe
I don't think it was.
Go back and look before the next episode. Anyway, as we left off last time, Duke and Snake Eyes have been kidnapped, and Cobra has the weather device, and that's about it.
Yep.
And Roadblock and Flint were being attacked by the vines, and they were about to be strangled to death, and that was our exciting cliffhanger.
So much here to break down, gentlemen.
This is what I'm saying. Like once we got going, I was like, oh, we're golden.
Where do we start? Do we start in the vines?
I mean, let's just go from the let's go from the beginning. So we're in the vines.
We're in the pit of chaos, right? And Roadblock and Flint and at first I was like, oh, is Roadblock not doing the rhyming thing yet?
Oh no, yes, he is.
And then he rhymed. So I was like, okay, good. That's
G.I. Joe's on Etrigan the Demon.
And then he rhymed again and again.
And at some point he said sucka, I believe. Sure. Which I wasn't sure if they went blaxploitation with Roadblock as much later on in the series. I don't think they did. But what I thought was interesting was that they cut through the vines and then they come across this blinding light to find that Mutt and Junkyard have utilized the engines of their down Sky Striker to burn the vines, and Flint and Roadblock discover this by standing directly in the plume of the engine.
Yeah, it was great. I almost couldn't believe it. Like, you can almost let go of the dodgy physics of the first one. You know, you can almost let that go. Radiation, no one really understood radiation.
Sure.
Standing in the engine blast of a giant jet, everyone knows would melt you. And yet, no problem. Not a problem.
I'm looking at a still frame right here where Roadblock is downright happy about it. He's got a big smile on his face. And then, you could turn them way down, for example. Like, obviously, they're not high enough to create thrust, or that would be a big problem there. But even at their lowest, they're, I want to say, 20 feet max away from the back of that jet. And, do you remember
the safe distance? They're not.
Do you remember, like, the toys? Every toy of every jet, most G.I. Joe ones had the stickers that you put on. They were the realistic things that would say, warning, danger, do not step. So, that was all over those toys. So the toys told us not to do that. Yeah. These guys, it doesn't matter. And it also brings up the idea that, like, at this point, the adult men making this know it is ridiculous. they can't. They're not stupid. There's wonderful writing in here. There's a couple of things like, oh, that's actually really good. But they just don't care.
Right.
And I kind of admire it.
They've had the 3 martini lunch, and they come back and they, oh, fuck it, they're standing in the jet wash.
Oh, so bizarre. And then Flint and Mutt fashion a very loosely put together helicopter.
They made a helicopter that functions from scratch.
The spare parts from the jet.
In a short amount of time, while being accosted by killer plants.
Oh. Which, by the way, I don't know a lot about aerodynamics and helicopters. Honestly, I find them a bit of a mystery in how they work. But I feel like the width of the helicopter blades in relation to the amount of weight of Mutt, Junkyard, Flint, and Roadblock, it just doesn't seem to add up to me. I don't know.
Yeah, they're very tiny rotors. Well, Roadblock gets pulled back down, and that. I will say, Josh, I had a similar feeling to you in the very beginning because so Snake Eyes and Duke are now put into the pit of whatever it was called.
The Arena of Sport. The Arena of Sport.
The same exact arena name from the last one, even though it's a whole new base. And it was a very perfunctory sort of fight.
All their headquarters need to have an Arena of Sport. What do you? Come on.
This one's more high tech. It's more like the Danger Room. It has like holograms and
Yeah, the neural kind of things or whatever. I did enjoy Cobra Commander saying, boy, I hope we get this over with quickly so we can get back to destroying Washington. Which I was like, hey, dude, you're the one who chose to do this.
You're in charge. You're the commander. You can say, we're going to do this fight later. Let's finish our mission here.
He put on his Arena of Sport hood. Once you do that, you're kind of committed.
He can't go into the main room in the hood. He's got to have the mask on. So
putting the mask back on is kind of a process. So.
And I will say it was a lot to swallow to listen to Duke have a conversation with himself and pretend he's talking to Snake Eyes.
I love that.
Like, we've got to get out of here. What? If only we could communicate with the team? You're right, Snake Eyes. Like it was...
He pointed to his belt.
Snake Eyes like, I'm not saying any of that.
Stop giving me my words.
This guy's an asshole.
It's the Chewbacca R2D2 factor.
Yeah.
One thing was cool about this was you had the introduction of a couple of new Joes, or at least showing them more in action. So suddenly, not only is Doc, he's the pacifist, right?
Yes,
Doc is their medic pacifist. He's also apparently a genius at engineering and physics and science.
Well, now here's the thing: he's not though, because I did look up Doc's bio, and he's an internist, and he got his degree from Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
Nowhere does it say that he's a physicist.
Right. That's a secondary. Every Joe has a secondary skill.
And you also see Breaker walking out with this amazing energy transference technology.
And also, what I like is that also very loose with the naming. Well, might as well call it a mirror. and then also has no idea if it's going to work, but says, "Hey, let's try it."
Well, that's how all great science happens.
But in a small room with a bunch of people and a lot of flame.
We're gonna blast this energy around and try to blow up this random brick wall we have in this room.
These are not people who stand on safety. They stand in the jet plume in the G.I. Joe.
I remember Real Genius, and that laser beam kept going for miles.
It really did. Well, until it got to the pool with the party.
Right. Well, obviously, then it lit the pool up. God, that movie.
I do have to say, I do love the G.I. Joe arcing beams over the curvature of the Earth shots. They love a good arcing beam.
Yeah, take that, flat earthers. even back then.
What I also liked was that as soon as they did the little test, they immediately roll out, and Doc, I guess, has fashioned hundreds of these mirrors at some point because they pretty much unleash a swarm of helicopters out of the Joe base.
Yeah,
it was just that convoy was enormous.
Also, the sound effect they used for not barbecue. Who's the flamethrower guy here?
A blowtorch.
Blowtorch. The sound they used for blowtorch's flamethrower was not a flamethrower sound.
Yeah.
It was like, wow.
Yeah, it was. I was ready. I was like, oh, we're gonna see some big flames.
I mean, we saw flames, but it sounded like lasers coming out. We're so Cobra, they G.I. Joe tries to use lasers to stop Cobra's weather device from attacking, but Cobra, subverts that by attacking them with giant hail rocks. Hail that
which was effective, and they stopped doing it and moved to something that was ineffective.
But that's sort of the side, portion.
This is
the main
this is
course.
All precursor. This is all B plot as far as I'm concerned.
The main course,
even though it is the A plot,
where Flint and Mutt, they had to leave Roadblock behind, and do they crash into where they are? And it doesn't really.
I think
say.
They do. They do crash, and they get attacked by a swarm of Cobra blue shirts, which leads to possibly one of my all-time favorite things in all of G.I. Joe.
Yeah, we want to do that, but there's a couple of cleanup things that we have to do before we get to it. 100%.
You know where I'm going.
Right? Come on. So they crash, they do the thing. We go back to Cobra Base, and then you have the Zartan Destro thing. Zartan gets hit by the sun again, which Destro thinks is hilarious. He cannot get enough of other people's buffoonery. And then from that sunlight scene, we cut to Roadblock, who's been struggling in these killer plants for possibly hours.
Right.
And the thing that kills off the plants
is sunlight.
Is sun. And I just from a thematic thing to go from sun making Zartan weak and Destro happy to being the thing that saves Roadblock.
It's a nice little...
from the one thing in the world that needs sun.
No photosynthesis with these plants.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that makes them not plants. I mean,
Well,
I'm not a scientist.
There's some sort of mutant plant. There's some sort of plant we never even heard of yet.
Yeah, got another plant.
Yeah.
So then, Act 3.
Yeah. So you get Mutt and Flint, who crashed the helicopter that is, I'm surprised it even worked, and they get attacked by some Cobra Blue
Well, you know what?
shirts.
Crashing the helicopter is the most realistic thing that's happened on this show.
That's fair. That is fair. Good
Because
point.
that thing's not seaworthy or airworthy.
And so apparently they're in a Cobra-infested land, a Cobra-infested desert land, and so
a desert Springfield, if you will.
Right, exactly. And the best way for them to fit in is to, they pull a Han and Luke, and they take the uniforms of the Cobra guys. Great, except Flint leaves his beret on. And Mutt leaves his handlebar mustache on.
Well,
and so now they're just two dudes in Cobra uniforms without the helmet and the mask. So they're gonna stick out like a sore thumb, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, yet another example of why it's a good idea to keep your mask on.
Exactly. Although I have to say that
Topical.
Flint in the Cobra costume is one of my favorite looks ever. I think that's hysterical.
like Mutt's fine. I assume some of these guys, it's the early 80s, have mustaches on under these masks.
Sure.
But Flint with the beret was really funny. And
really funny.
also, so they walk up to this bar called, what's it called? Cobra.
The Cobra Café.
The
Cobra
Cobra
Café.
Cafe, which always on brand is Cobra. And it's just like, what kind of weird civilization is Cobra building out here in the
Look
desert?
at the thugs inside. These don't seem to be Cobra regulars. You got this guy with a pink mohawk. There's a guy with green hair. There's the old-timey sailor suit. Like when there was a pirate ship or an old, like there was always a guy with like stripy shirt.
Yeah.
Like there's one of those guys. He's bald. There's a mutant wolf who has no pupils. There's everything, but most importantly,
Well, we're going to get to that. One last thing. I will say that last week, Ron, you said that there was a striking increase in the animation. I thought this episode was really, really badly animated.
Was really badly animated to the point where Lady J had several different faces.
And at one point, Snake Eyes' head was triangle shaped. It was just, I had randomly paused it during the fight for like, because I had to go grab something, and it was a profile shot, and his head was literally triangle shaped. It was really, I don't know if they blew all the animation budget in the first episode or what, but it was weird.
I mean, the best thing, like if you like, I have the show paused. It's on YouTube, and I'm just sort of clicking through to different bits of it. The still frames are abysmal.
Yeah.
Like if you ever went and you bought like the animation cell of one of these, you'd be like, "What? This is awful."
This does except Flint in a Cobra costume.
Yep.
I would buy that in a second. I would.
And our next guy.
Well, that's the thing. So they go to this Cobra Cafe. Of course, they stick out like sore thumbs. They get into a bar fight in the middle of the day, and surprisingly, there's one person who just isn't moving from his table.
Read
And
the paper.
as I'm watching it, I go, "Is that?" No, it is.
He's reading he's reading the Cobra News, by the way.
None other than, I think collectively one of all three of our favorite characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shipwreck.
Yep.
I was surprised. I didn't think he would show up this early. I had forgotten this is how they find him. And also, he's not a Joe.
He's a mercenary?
You want to talk? Well, sort of. You want to talk about sticking out? He's in a full-on U.S. Navy uniform.
Right. And then, so not only that, but he's also a U.S. Navy uniform as a mercenary sailor in the desert.
Well, I mean, that's going to come up in a moment. First thing I noticed is that also Mutt or Junkyard also doesn't have pupils, so they're both
just creepy looking.
Yeah, they're both creepy looking, and they both hang off of the fight until later. Anyway, that's not the bit. So, the good part of this is coming up after we go back to Washington. So, how would you like to do this? Do we finish up the shipwreck section and then finish the show?
Yeah, well, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we'll go.
So they talk with him. They say, "You're type of man." The dog gives him a sniff, and they're like, "All right, you're all right with us," which I buy, by the way. But his solution to escape is that he pushes a boat in the desert. I just want to remind you.
Well, hold on. You skipped the whole important aspect of this, which is they say, "Hey, buddy, hey, sailor, what's your name?" Shipwreck. These aren't their names. These are their G.I. Joe code names.
No,
Duke isn't Duke's name. His name is Colton Hauser. Shipwreck's name is Hector.
Well,
Hector Delgado or Jack Nicholson or Christian Slater, however you want to play it here. But his name isn't Shipwreck. That's his G.I. Joe code name.
That also brings up the note. Like, he's absolutely Jack. He's the cover of 5 Easy Pieces here.
Yeah.
He is that guy. But I had always remembered like his accent being really grating.
Yeah.
But in this, he's playing it cool. Like, it's Jack. Yeah. No, he's, and I was like, did they just decide not
it probably
to do
evolved
that later?
over the time. But it's also important to note that
Evolved.
this is his first appearance anywhere. He was created for the cartoon, in case people didn't know that, and then was later, a year later, became a toy, and then 2 years later joined the comic book. But he was created for the show.
And clearly someone who is a Jack Nicholson fan from that film.
Oh, for sure.
And just he's so good. And I never knew that he wasn't originally a Joe, that he was a random Cobra mercenary.
Which is crazy.
And the sand boat, like, seriously.
So the sand boat. And I know that we talk a lot about the physics, and that's not how that works. But man, does this not how that works. They have a boat on runners. They even put in a sound effect of the friction that the boat creates on the sand.
You have to have some really strong wind for the wind to send you across the sand on skis.
And you'd have to have, at the very least, you'd have to have a Teflon coating down there. It doesn't work.
I'm a sand pirate.
But he's got the full sea. His name is Shipwreck. It's, like, there's a better way to do it. I don't know what. Even the hovercraft would make more sense. But God damn it if they didn't get away in style.
Yeah. Well, so what actually is a not great episode gives us Shipwreck, gives us Blowtorch, gives us some good Cobra Commander ranting.
Yes.
So keeps it moving, I guess. But honestly, the first episode was strong. This one, not as strong.
It depends on your definition of strong. Because by the end, I was like, I can't wait for tomorrow.
I know. Yeah.
Well,
there was also at the end of when they deal with the mirrors and the beam and all that sort of stuff. Then at one point, Lady J runs in and goes, "I just got a news flash from the base." It's like, how? What?
Flash.
Everybody has a secondary. Yeah. Secondary job. Somebody's gathering intel, and now there's 3 more pieces that have been falling off into pieces of the world, and we're back.
Hold on. You're really jumping over that. So we have the exact same thing where the weather device blows up into 3 pieces and falls to the earth. So now we have the chase again for the 3 pieces, the 3 elements.
I said, here we are. Not only did the 3 pieces fall down to earth in clear, distinctive pieces of the device, not like shattered or anything.
Square piece, round piece, triangle piece.
It's a modular design.
Segments. And then not only did they fall back to Earth, but they fall back to Earth in what looks like Mayan ruins and like other like specific locations. Yeah.
3 separate kind of places. It was like game on at that point. I was with you, whereas like this episode, it's okay. Shipwreck was a highlight, but then once the mass device blew up. Not the mass device. That was the last one. Once the weather device blows up,
it doesn't matter.
Into three distinct shapes. I was like, now we're on. Now we're cooking.
There's one other little thing I just want to make a note of. We don't have to discuss it, but every time the G.I. Joe base shows up, which was way more impressive than the toy was, but thematically about the same shape, I think, what if they attack from one of the other 3 sides? I just love that it's a freestanding building, apparently in the middle of a desert, because every time they take off, like they're in Arizona or New Mexico or somewhere. I just think that's bad design. Maybe it's backed up against a building like Helm's Deep or something, but it doesn't seem like there's like, now that I know a little more than I do when I was a kid, where you put your base is important strategically, and they just keep putting them in these open, like the Cobra base in the mountain was pretty good. That's now it's just in the middle of a desert.
Well, don't forget that it goes up and down. Like it can go down.
Underground,
I wouldn't be surprised if it can travel underground. I was excited for the preview next week because it looks like we're gonna get the Spirit Storm Shadow face off, which is the major diversion from the comics. Pairing Storm Shadow up with Spirit as opposed to Snake Eyes.
It's all happening very fast.
Very fast. So
there you go. That was G.I. Joe, The Vines of Evil, Part 2 of The Revenge of Cobra, and Part 3 is called The Palace of Doom. So looking forward to that next week.
Hey, you know what? I have to go. I want you two to wrap up the show without me.
All right.
All right, we'll do that.
Josh, this was fun as always.
It was fun. It was.
Enjoy.
All right. Have fun. Ron, don't let me down.
I won't, considering I don't have any sort of script or any materials. This should be an adventure. So
Connor's going to be able to walk you through this.
All right, cool. Let's do it.
Yo, Joe. All right, so Josh is going on. We'll be back. We're skipping emails again. Contact@ifanboy.com is where you can write us in. Keep writing us in. We're going to get to them. Now that we're going to return back to a more normal format next week, there won't be a 40-minute discussion of a trade paperback to take up a lot of the show. So
right, but I feel like this week and last week was justified. So.
Oh, for sure. So real quick, some plugs. Josh's Talk Split with Kelly Thompson is still on the schedule. He says here on the schedule, so I assume that means he's scheduled the interview with her. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully he presses the right button this time. Booksplode, Jack Kirby's New Gods. Now that we're done with trade reading, we can get back to reading that. It's not undense, so it takes a while. So that'll be coming out soon. In the meantime, head over to fanboy.com. You can find all of our podcasts.
Connor, can I interrupt? Can I do a quick plug? Because I'm on the show so much, and there might be some new listeners.
Oh, that's true.
For those who don't know, if you're into technology and then specifically into Android mobile phones, I do co-host another show called All About Android over on the Twit Network. And so if you haven't checked it out, me and Jason and Florence are my co-hosts on that, and we have a blast every week. So go check that out. It's in, wherever you listen to audio podcasts. There's video on YouTube and on the Twit website. But so go look for All About Android. Go to twit.tv/AAA and go listen to that if you want to hear more of me not talking about G.I. Joe.
What do you talk about every week?
I honestly, it's like a 2-hour show every week. Like we talk about the news in the Android space. We talk about hardware. We review phones. We talk about apps. It's a fun time. So
how much is G.I. Joe based?
I try to insert G.I. Joe when and wherever I can.
So good job. Good work. Head over to fanboy.com. That's where you can find all of our iFanboy podcasts. You can find what the pick of the week is before the show comes out by liking facebook.com/iFanboy and following @iFanboy on Twitter and following @iFanboy Comics on Instagram. And individually, we are at CS Kilpatrick on Instagram, at J.A. Flanagan on Twitter and Instagram, and at RonXO on Twitter and Instagram. Also, our new YouTube, it's not new, but we've been newly cultivating it, our YouTube page, youtube.com/iFanboy, adding all of our old video shows. We're getting some good ones up there, and by good, I mean terrible. We're starting to slowly break through to when we figured out what we're doing. First Con show is up there. We did a lot of listener mail in the beginning of the video show. I think every 3 episodes we do listener mail because we
got a lot of mail, but we still get a lot of mail.
We do, but we just didn't know what we were doing yet. We figured it out eventually. So check it out at youtube.com/iFanboy. Subscribe and like, as the kids say. I don't even know if you do that to a page, but whatever. If you like the show, finally leave us a review, star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, whatever aggregating service you use for our show, All About Android. Any podcast you listen to, it helps to rate and review the shows wherever you find your podcast. That's how people find podcasts. It helps the algorithm stuff. It's very beneficial to any podcast you're a fan of. So appreciate that. And even better than that, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, your colleagues, your comic stores when they open back up that you enjoy the show. We do appreciate that. Word of mouth helps spread the iFanboy love across the globe. Right?
Indeed. So much love. All the love, please.
All right. Well,
go enjoy comic books now that they're coming back. I can't tell you how much fun it's been to be able to share that news on the Marvel side of things. And so I know the rest of the industry is gearing up to go back to business. So looking forward to the show getting back to normal and the comics world getting back to normal.
Right. So next week, more books are coming out, but not all of them. And I believe the week after is when things should get really back to normal. So we'll slowly transition the show back at that point.
Yeah, May 27th is the first day for new comic books from Marvel, at least. I don't know about other publishers, but yeah, so two more Wednesdays, and then we'll be back to normal.
All right, so until then, or we'll be back next week anyway. Until then, I am Connor.
I'm Ron. Yo, Joe.